There exists a profound and fundamental truth about the human soul that most people move through their entire lives without ever fully recognizing. There is a specific test that the soul endures in absolute and unbroken silence, a trial that lies entirely beyond the reach of any therapist, beyond the well-intentioned pages of self-help literature, and beyond even the deepest understanding of those who genuinely love you. You may have spent many long years believing you were simply surviving a series of difficult circumstances, wholly unaware that you were, in fact, undergoing the most rigorous and demanding examination that human consciousness can ever face. This is the ordeal that separates the essential self from the accumulated persona, the psychological mask constructed over a lifetime of adaptation to the expectations of others. In my decades of clinical work and deep immersion in the architecture of the human psyche, I devoted myself to studying these invisible initiations, these secret rites of passage that reshape certain souls completely from within. I observed time and again that some individuals pass through what I have termed the process of individuation, the demanding inner journey toward wholeness by means of a doorway of profound and searing suffering, a suffering that leaves no external scars, no visible marks for the world to observe or measure, yet which transforms everything within the interior landscape of the soul. It is a fire that burns away everything false, everything borrowed, everything that was never genuinely yours, leaving only what is authentic and irreducibly true. The signs of this deep internal transformation are not obvious to the casual observer. They do not announce themselves with public declaration or dramatic external change. They manifest in the most subtle of ways, in quiet shifts of perception and being, recognizable only to those souls who have themselves walked this solitary path through the dark night of interior experience. Perhaps you have already passed this silent test without knowing it, without any formal recognition or external confirmation that something fundamental has permanently changed within you. Perhaps the evidence is written not in your circumstances, but in your energy, in the quality of your presence that others sense but cannot quite name, a depth that speaks of journeys taken in the interior world where no one else could accompany you. The 7 signs I want to explore with you are not achievements to be celebrated with external recognition. They are quiet landmarks, an inner knowing that consciousness has been forever altered by its encounter with its own deepest truth. They are the recognizable features of a country that only the genuinely courageous have visited and returned from changed. I have come to understand through my work and my own interior struggles that certain souls undergo what can only be described as a second psychological birth during their lifetime. This is not a physical event, but a profoundly spiritual one. It does not announce itself to the world. It happens in the spaces between words, in the silence that follows great internal storms, in the quiet moment when you recognize with a shock of genuine clarity that the person you are fighting so desperately to become already lives quietly within you, waiting only to be acknowledged rather than constructed. The essential question is therefore not whether you are worthy of this transformation. The soul does not occupy itself with such judgments. The question is whether you can recognize with sufficient humility that it has already begun its work within you. Like a great tree that grows stronger and more distinctly itself after surviving a lightning strike, the human psyche develops a new form of resilience through this process. Not the brittle rigidity that resists all pressure until it shatters, but the flexible, supple strength of something that has incorporated challenge into its very structure and made it part of what it is. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Your greatest and most beautiful journey is the one that leads you back to yourself. Subscribe to Carl Jung Philosophy and hit the like button, and let's walk that path together. The first sign reveals itself most clearly in your transformed relationship with solitude. Where once aloneness felt like punishment, a sentence of exile from the warmth and confirmation of others, it has been converted into sanctuary, into holy ground. I have written extensively about the abandonment complex, that deep psychological wound which drives individuals to scatter their energy in desperate searches for approval and connection outside themselves. It is a hunger that can never be genuinely satisfied by external means. When this complex no longer governs your choices, when its insistent voice finally falls silent, something fundamental has shifted within your psychic structure. A particular quality of stillness emerges in those who have passed through their soul's most demanding trial. It is not the stillness of withdrawal or of depression. It is the quietude that comes from no longer needing to convince anyone of your worth, including, most importantly, yourself. The battle for self-acceptance has concluded. You find yourself genuinely capable of being alone without the restless, anxious impulse to fill the empty space with noise, with activity, or with other people's energy. This solitude becomes creative rather than destructive, fertile rather than barren. It is precisely in these quiet, unoccupied moments that your most important insights arise, not from constant interaction with others, but from a deep and abiding communion with the deeper parts of yourself that only emerge when the external world grows silent. I have identified this capacity for meaningful and creative solitude as a true hallmark of the individuated personality. The mark of someone who has genuinely found their center, rather than merely performing the discovery of it. You may begin to notice, with compassion rather than judgment, how others flee from themselves through constant social engagement, through relentless entertainment, through relationships that function primarily as distractions rather than as genuine connections. There is no judgment in this observation, only a quiet recognition of patterns you yourself once followed, patterns you have now permanently outgrown. Leave the number 111 in the comments. In the symbolic and psychological framework that Jung spent his life mapping, 111 represents the first genuine awakening of individual consciousness, the moment a soul stops moving automatically through inherited patterns and begins recognizing the deeper intelligence operating beneath the surface of its experience. If something in what you have just encountered resonates with a transformation you have been living through without having the language for it, 111 is your signal. The second sign manifests powerfully in your transformed relationship with your own shadow. Much of my career was devoted to exploring the critical process of shadow integration, the psychological work by which we cease rejecting the darker, disowned aspects of our personality and begin instead to work with them consciously, bringing them into the full light of awareness. This is not work for the faint of heart. It requires a willingness to look directly at what you would most prefer to look away from, and to find there not a monster to be eliminated, but a neglected dimension of yourself that has been waiting with considerable patience for your honest acknowledgement. This integration occurs within you in ways that would have been entirely impossible before your interior trial. You develop a brutal and uncompromising honesty with yourself about your own capacity for manipulation, your hidden hungers for power and control, your ability to wound others when you feel sufficiently threatened or cornered. Rather than terrifying you as it once would have, this depth of self-knowledge becomes a genuine source of strength and psychological realism. You know what you are capable of, and therefore you can master it rather than being mastered by it. You recognize these darker impulses not as character flaws to be eliminated through force of will, but as primal archetypal energies to be understood, accepted, and consciously channeled toward genuinely constructive ends. Your anger, for instance, undergoes a profound transformation. Where it once either exploded destructively in moments of overwhelm or festered in silent repression, it has become what might be called a sacred fire. It burns now only what genuinely needs to be released from your life. Relationships that no longer serve your authentic development. Patterns that keep you compressed into a version of yourself you have already outgrown. Agreements you entered when you understood considerably less about your own inherent worth. This refined and conscious anger now serves your evolution rather than sabotaging it. And there is an energetic integrity that others perceive in you as a result. A wholeness that is palpable even when you remain completely silent, because you have made a genuine peace with your own contradictions, rather than exhausting yourself in the attempt to resolve them. You no longer strive to eliminate the paradoxes within yourself. You have learned instead to hold them consciously, to allow the dynamic tension between opposing forces to generate the creative energy that I identified as absolutely essential for all true psychological growth. The very way you process emotional intensity has shifted at a fundamental level. Where overwhelming feelings could once destabilize you for extended periods, throwing your entire interior life into chaos, you now possess a container strong enough to hold the full spectrum of human experience, from ecstasy to despair. Your emotional range has expanded rather than contracted, but your relationship to that range has become one of conscious partnership rather than unconscious possession. You are holding the reins now, rather than being dragged behind the chariot. The third sign manifests as a developed and largely effortless immunity to psychological projection. Projection is that unconscious process by which people deposit their own unprocessed psychological material onto others, making them involuntary carriers of qualities and emotions that properly belong to the one doing the projecting. You develop an almost clinical capacity to observe, without being drawn into, the moment when someone is attempting to make you responsible for emotions, reactions, or self-perceptions that belong entirely to them. This recognition arrives without anger or any sense of superiority. It presents itself simply as data, valuable information about how the human psyche operates when it has not yet developed the courage or the tools for genuine self-examination. The drama that once possessed a powerful gravitational pull over you now feels foreign to your system, like a language you understood once but no longer speak fluently. You can witness triangulations, subtle manipulations, and complex emotional games with the detached interest of a researcher observing natural phenomena, understanding the mechanics of what is occurring without being caught in the storm it is attempting to generate. Your compassion evolves from the codependent variety that once sacrificed itself in the attempt to rescue others into a mature and grounded compassion, the kind that offers genuine loving presence without dissolving into another person's suffering or accepting their crisis as your own emergency. This connects directly to what I termed the transcendent function, that crucial psychological capacity to position oneself above dualistic conflicts and perceive the larger archetypal patterns operating within any situation. This function activates within you with increasing spontaneity when others arrive carrying their crises. You no longer experience the automatic sympathetic anxiety that once made their emergencies feel identical to yours. There is instead a serene recognition of both the limits of your responsibility and the deep wisdom of allowing others to encounter their own necessary challenges. For it is in that encounter, as difficult and uncomfortable as it appears from the outside, that genuine growth becomes possible for them. You find yourself naturally, almost instinctively, withdrawing from situations where your energy is being utilized to maintain someone else's fragile emotional equilibrium, not as an act of cruelty, but as an expression of genuine clarity about the crucial difference between supporting another's authentic growth and enabling their continued avoidance of the lessons their life is specifically designed to deliver. Others may interpret this new quality of boundaried presence as coldness or indifference. You recognize it for what it actually is, the necessary protection of something sacred and irreplaceable within yourself. The fourth sign emerges in your intuitive capacity, which has blossomed into a fully activated and reliable function of your entire psyche. Where once you depended primarily on logical analysis, carefully weighing every available option, constructing elaborate lists of considerations, you now consult an inner knowing, a quality of direct perception that connects you to information lying well beyond the reach of rational thought alone. Synchronicities, those meaningful coincidences that I spent much of my career documenting and theorizing, begin to flow through your life with increasing frequency and undeniable significance, creating a palpable sense that events are aligning according to an intelligence considerably greater than your own conscious planning could ever orchestrate. You develop, through practice, a reliable ability to distinguish between the urgent, frantic demands of the wounded ego grasping for control and the quiet, persistent guidance of the self, that archetype of wholeness that emerges and deepens as individuation advances. Your capacity to read the invisible layers of people and situations expands in ways that are difficult to articulate, but impossible to mistake once you have genuinely experienced them. You perceive motivations, hidden patterns, and potential outcomes that remain entirely obscured to those operating from a more purely surface level of awareness. Not through cynicism or suspicion, but through a refined sensitivity to the energetic information flowing beneath what is visibly presented. Leave the number 444 in the comments. In the symbolic framework that Jung drew from across multiple traditions and mapped onto his understanding of the deep psyche, 444 represents stable foundation, the moment a new and truer understanding of yourself begins crystallizing from the level of felt experience into something you can actually stand upon and build from. If the signs being described here are resonating with something you have been living through, 444 marks that recognition precisely. The fifth sign reveals itself in your embrace of the natural, cyclical nature of all psychological development. You have integrated the archetype of death and rebirth so completely into the fabric of your being that you no longer experience the periods when your life seems to dissolve, when structures fall away, when what you had carefully constructed loses its coherence or its meaning, as catastrophes requiring immediate repair. These times of apparent ending have become familiar to you, almost welcome in a certain sense, as necessary preludes to expansion and renewal. The dark night before the dawn no longer terrifies you the way it once did. You have been through it before. You know what it means. You know what follows. Your relationship with uncertainty has undergone a transformation that those who have not experienced it find genuinely difficult to comprehend. Where once you required guaranteed outcomes before you could commit to a direction, where you needed a complete map before you would take the first step, you now recognize that the most meaningful and lasting growth occurs in precisely the space between decision and result. In the willingness to act from deep inner alignment without any external promise of reward or confirmation, you have developed what might be called the courage of genuine trust. Not trust in specific outcomes, which is merely another form of the old need for control, but trust in the process itself and in your own capacity to meet whatever emerges from the unknown with integrity and with sufficient psychological resources. An energetic economy begins to operate within you with increasing intelligence and efficiency. Your vital energy is no longer scattered across dozens of draining commitments undertaken out of obligation, guilt, or the fear of disappointing others. You learn to invest your life force with the discernment of a wise gardener who understands exactly what to cultivate, what requires patient tending, and what must simply be allowed to follow its natural cycle to completion and release. You understand that genuine growth moves in spirals rather than straight ascending lines, that it returns to the same core themes again and again, but at deepening levels of understanding and integration. This brings with it a tremendous patience with your own process, a genuine kindness toward your own unfolding that is qualitatively different from anything that could have been available to you before the trial. Your creativity undergoes a fundamental reorientation from being a tool for external achievement and the demonstration of your worth to the world, into a mode of authentic internal expression. You create not to prove anything to anyone, but because creation has become a form of communion, a sacred dialogue between your conscious mind and the deeper intelligence moving through you. The creative act itself becomes sufficient, regardless of whether the world recognizes or values what it produces. This represents a profound freedom that those still trapped in the need for external validation cannot yet access or even fully imagine. The sixth sign emerges with particular clarity in your transformed relationship with external validation. I wrote extensively about the inferiority complex, those deep psychological wounds that drive individuals to constantly measure themselves against others and to expend enormous energy demonstrating their worth to an audience that can never finally satisfy them. This complex dissolves within you so completely that the very impulse to measure your value against external standards begins to feel genuinely foreign, like a reflex from a previous version of yourself that you can observe with curiosity rather than identification. You develop what I called firm inner authority, a stable psychological structure that validates your own experiences and perceptions independently of social consensus or popular opinion. This is one of the most significant and practically consequential shifts that the entire process of individuation produces. Your self-worth no longer fluctuates with the changing conditions of praise or criticism. Both register with a similar quality of neutrality, processed as potentially useful information or not, but never experienced as final verdicts on the nature of your soul. This shift frees an enormous reservoir of energy that was previously consumed entirely in the exhausting work of managing your public image, monitoring how you were being perceived, and adjusting your behavior in anticipation of others' judgments. Your authenticity becomes genuinely non-negotiable, a bedrock principle from which you will not depart regardless of the social cost. You find yourself naturally, almost instinctively, choosing rejection for who you actually are over acceptance for a carefully calibrated performance of someone more palatable. The way you inhabit your physical body shifts accordingly. A groundedness emerges from this genuine self-possession that others register as presence, as authority. Not the dominating authority that seeks power over others, but the quiet and unshakable authority of someone who is fully at home within themselves. You move through space as someone who belongs to themselves first and foremost, a sovereign within your own interior kingdom. The seventh and final sign manifests as a refined and almost instinctual discrimination about how you invest your precious and finite energy. The entire process of individuation culminates in what can accurately be described as true energetic sovereignty, the developed capacity to protect your essence without aggression, without the construction of defensive walls, simply through the quality of your conscious presence and your willingness to exercise genuine choice about where your life force flows. Your presence in the world becomes more selective and consequently more genuinely significant. You no longer distribute yourself indiscriminately, offering your attention and vital energy to any and all demands that present themselves. This is not elitism or indifference. It is hard-earned wisdom about the sacred and non-renewable nature of your own life force. The recognition that what you give your energy to is not a trivial choice, but one of the most consequential decisions available to a human being. A natural and unforced authority emanates from you now, not power over others, which is always, at its root, a symptom of the absence of power over oneself, but genuine power over yourself, which is the true hallmark of psychological maturity in its deepest sense. The guilt that once accompanied the act of setting limits, of saying no to demands that would diminish you, dissolves completely. You protect your energy with the naturalness and necessity of a skilled gardener protecting a rare and irreplaceable plant from conditions that would destroy it. Not dramatically, not apologetically, but simply as an expression of understanding what is genuinely at stake. You develop the capacity to recognize with swift and sure intuition those individuals, projects, and relationships that drain your vitality without offering anything of authentic value in return. You withdraw from them without drama, without extended explanation, and without the prolonged internal negotiation that once made every such decision into a crisis. This is not coldness. It is clarity about what you are here to protect and what you are here to offer, and to whom. Leave the number 528 in the comments. In the symbolic and vibrational framework that builds on the archetypal language Jung explored throughout his career, 528 represents the frequency of genuine, core-level transformation, the specific resonance associated with the healing and reorganization of the deepest patterns within the psyche. If you are recognizing yourself in these signs, if something in this description is landing with the particular quality of recognition rather than mere intellectual interest, 528 is your marker. Leave it here and let this community witness where you are in your own journey. Your relationship with suffering itself undergoes a transformation so fundamental that it reorganizes the entire way you move through difficulty. Where once pain was something to be avoided at virtually any cost, numbed, fled from, explained away, or projected outward onto circumstances and other people, it has become a teacher whose difficult lessons you have learned to receive with a quality of attention that extracts genuine wisdom from what was previously only endured. This does not mean you seek suffering out or romanticize it. It does not mean you have become masochistic or that you confuse unnecessary pain with spiritual growth. It means you have developed the psychological alchemy of turning what cannot be avoided into something that serves your deepest development. The transmutation of lead into gold that the alchemists Jung spent so many years studying were always, at their most profound level, describing as an interior process. A great stillness follows you now as a constant companion on your journey. Not an absence of movement, engagement, or deep feeling, but a presence of centered calm that persists beneath whatever surface conditions you are navigating. This stillness is not performed. It cannot be performed. It can only be arrived at through the specific passage you have already made. It attracts, without any deliberate effort on your part, those who are searching for something they cannot quite name, a quality of being that they sense somewhere in their experience they have lost access to, or perhaps never yet found. You become, without trying and without seeking it, a living demonstration of what the individuated soul actually looks and feels like in ordinary human existence. A testament, simply through your way of inhabiting your life, to the genuine possibility of wholeness. Your relationship with hope matures from the wishful and anxious variety, which is always, at its root, a disguised form of the refusal to fully inhabit the present moment, into an active and grounded faith in the life process itself. You no longer invest your hope in specific, predetermined outcomes that must materialize in specific ways in order for you to feel that everything is acceptable. You have developed instead a profound and tested trust in your own capacity to meet whatever emerges from the unknown, to respond with integrity, with creativity, and with the resilience that only the interior journey produces. This is not optimism. Optimism is a mood, a temperamental orientation toward expecting favorable outcomes. What you carry is something considerably more durable, a structural confidence in your own capacity to navigate whatever actually arrives. This second psychological birth marks not merely a recovery from wounding, not simply a return to some prior state of health that the difficulties temporarily disrupted, but a fundamental reorganization of consciousness itself. You become psychologically independent of your earliest programming in ways that were genuinely impossible before the trial. The conditioning of your family system, of your culture, of the particular emotional environment in which your earliest self was formed. These things no longer operate as invisible scripts directing your choices from beneath the threshold of awareness. You have brought them into consciousness. You have examined them, and you have made the deliberate, costly, and irreversible choice to live from something deeper and more genuinely your own. There is a sense of completion that emerges from this place that has nothing whatsoever to do with external achievements and everything to do with an internal reconciliation. A peace treaty finally negotiated and signed between all the warring dimensions of yourself that have been in conflict for as long as you can remember. You no longer need to recover from your past because you have learned, through the most demanding possible means, to create your life from your present moment, from what is actual rather than from what was. From what you genuinely are rather than from what you were conditioned to believe you must become in order to be acceptable. The person you once believed you needed to become, the ideal that drove you forward with such relentless urgency for so many years, is revealed in retrospect as a limitation, a pale and somewhat diminished imitation of what was actually available to you all along. The unique, flawed, contradictory, and genuinely magnificent being that you already were, waiting beneath every layer of performance and adaptation for the moment you would finally have the courage to simply be it, without apology and without the exhausting labor of constant justification. Jung identified the coniunctio oppositorum, the union of opposites, as the deepest and most significant achievement available to human consciousness. The reconciliation within a single psyche of everything that appeared to be in irresolvable conflict, light and shadow, strength and vulnerability, the impulse toward solitude and the genuine desire for authentic connection, the capacity for fierce self-protection and the openness to real intimacy. When these opposing forces are no longer splitting you in two, when they have been integrated into a dynamic and living wholeness, you are no longer depleted by the internal conflict that once consumed so much of your available energy. That energy returns to you, and what you do with it from that place of genuine integration is what your actual life, the life that was always waiting on the other side of the trial, is made of. If you recognize yourself in these 7 signs, know with genuine certainty that you have passed through an initiation that the majority of people will never encounter, and that those who have not experienced it from the inside cannot fully understand from the outside. You have undergone a journey that cannot be adequately conveyed in language only pointed toward. Your transformation serves not only your own evolution, it creates, simply through your way of being present in the world, a template of possibility for others who are earlier in their own passage. Your presence in a room changes the quality of what is available there, not because you seek to influence or to teach or to demonstrate anything, but because wholeness, when it is genuine, is contagious in the best possible sense. It reminds others at a level beneath conscious thought that something they may have given up on is actually possible. And this is not an ending. This is the beginning of the next and more mysterious phase of your evolution. The journey of conscious individuation does not conclude. It deepens. It opens into territories that were inaccessible before you completed the passage you have now completed. What becomes available on the far side of the soul's most demanding test is not rest or arrival at some final destination of permanent peace. It is the capacity to engage with life from a fundamentally different and more authentic foundation, to bring everything you are without concealment and without performance into genuine contact with everything that is. Subscribe to Carl Jung philosophy and continue this journey with us, because the soul that has passed its most difficult test is only now beginning to discover what it was always being prepared for. Leave the number 777 in the comments. In the symbolic language of quantum consciousness and the deep archetypal framework that Jung mapped throughout his lifetime of clinical and theoretical work, 777 represents the alignment of inner truth with outer reality, the specific moment when what has been developed through interior work begins expressing itself visibly and undeniably in the quality of your lived experience. If these 7 signs have landed with genuine recognition rather than mere intellectual interest, if something in you has said, "Yes, this is what I have been living through," then 777 is your signal. Leave it here. Let this moment be marked. Let this community witness where you are standing.